To think is to differ or to defer, which we heard this morning, depends on what we understand where the very possibility of differing and deferring comes from in a philosophical understanding of these terms. And again, this is something that's quite, there's a very robust and interesting conversation about these. And of course, philosophical debates within each of these domains, within the domain of immanence, the domain of transcendence, the domain of the transcendental, are themselves quite distinct. So let me say that if ontology concerns me at all, and if it concerned me when I was in philosophy, or if it concerns me now that I'm in anthropology, it concerns me insofar as ontology is understood as an arrangement or arrangements of existence at the plane of existence. That is, I stand before you as someone who unabashedly is a part of an immanent critique. And by that I understand something very, very specific by immanent critique, and I do not understand it in the way that at least early non-C does. Now, for many of you, you might think, I don't know why you're telling me this, I don't know what you're talking about, but that's one of the first things, if we're going to do philosophy as anthropologists, we might want to start doing. So, for me, ontology matters, and it concerns me if by ontology we mean arrangements of existence at the plane of existence. So an arrangement is one level of existence, it's nowhere else, and entities are entailed therein, and one could say that there may be another level, entities may be another level of existence, but it's an arrangement of existence at the plane of existence. These arrangements of existence, for me, if we're defining what we mean by ontology, this arrangement of existence at the plane of existence is never one. That is, I stand up before you and I say there was never any zero, so the whole question of event, the whole question of birth, the whole question of where did something come from, how did being come to be, doesn't interest me. I stand before you as someone who believes that in the beginning there was one, and one was always more than two. And again, you might say, I don't know why you're telling me this. But maybe we need to understand why we might be interested in this if anthropology is going to become philosophical. It's always more than one, even as these arrangements of existence at the plane of existence are becoming hegemonic. So it's not a matter of whether or not an arrangement of existence is hegemonic or not. If you're arguing about whether hegemonic arrangements of existence are one, two, or multiple at the beginning. Why? For me, at least, in the beginning, and I will define this, because every arrangement installs possible unarrangements and rearrangements. That is, when I talk about the otherwise, I'm not talking about the other and the self are within a given arrangement. The otherwise are instead these immanent unarrangements and rearrangements that are installed at the very moment that an arrangement of existence is put in place. All these arrangements can be extinguished, and with them the sub-entities and the A-entities that they entail. But these arrangements do not die, and I'll come back to this. The names we could associate with this first point, and this is my first point, that we have to think about what we mean, is Deleuze, Sayre, Spinoza. So that's my first point. The second point, if we tackle ontology, power and politics, then it's useful to conceive of power as that which enables or assemblage or these arrangements of existence to maintain or not their apparent unity and reproduce this apparent unity, no matter what that they are continually creating their own otherwises. And thus, and now since I have 2 minutes, I will simply say that these actually organized and disorganized arrangements foreclose the possibility of any transcendental norm or even a Habermasian orientation. So what should interest us, or interest me, if I'm interested in ontology and then in politics, is how an immanent approach to ontology forecloses the very possibility of any superordinate or transcendental norm or Habermasian orientation. So if the first problem I think we faced in my first point was the problem of what we mean by ontology, immanent or transcendental. The second point, the problem we face is one of adjudication, which does not come up here. That is, if we're going to talk about ontology and we're going to talk about power in politics, front and center is the problem of adjudication. Names that come up, of course, along with James and etc., are others like Nancy Fraser, Habermas, Foucault, and etc. So that's number 2. Number 3, ontology is itself, and this is my major point, ontology itself is in fact a power, and thus the site of competing politics because of its projection of a specific drama across concrete and seemingly incommensurate modes of knowledge. In a nutshell, ontology, since its inauguration, and we can go back to the early pre-Socratic questions of being and non-being if you want, has been founded on the problem of being and non-being, finitude and infinitude, the zero and the one. Good. And all these variations of the ontological problem of being and non-being, finitude and infinitude, the zero and the one, all these variations presuppose a certain kind of entity, namely life. And I don't mean merely human life, like my good friend Eduardo says, but namely life. That is, ontology is concerned with life whose primary features are presupposed as birth, growth, and death. And insofar as we constitute life through this ontological form of thought, we also constitute its opposite, that is non-life. That is the geological, the geochemical, as opposed to and distinct from the biochemical and the biological. Thus, there is not an ontology, and there should not be an anthropology of ontology, because ontology has always been bi-ontology. It's a bios that we're interested in, and insofar as there is only its negation into geontology, and thus if we're going to talk about the Anthropocene, which we should, and we're going to talk about other modes of life, which we should, then we have to open up and break ontology and understand that it is a form of projection which has a genealogy. Now here, if we want to be anthropologists in relation to other modes of worlds, the new, geontology. Then maybe we need new names in the conversation, that is not just Heidegger and Husserl and the rest of them, and not just the way in which we think about Husserl and Heidegger and Hegel and Kant and the rest of them with Nancy and Deleuze and etc. But maybe we could have Donna Haraway, and maybe we could have Denise De Silva, and maybe we could have Morrisell, and maybe we could have Mel Chen, and maybe we could have the new vitalists and the new animists, not all of whom I agree with. But at least they would be in the conversation. Thank you.